Hello everybody, Tim Adams once again with you, and we're going to be talking about digital snakes versus analog snakes today. And what I wanted to really focus on was kind of the advantages that digital snakes have over analog snakes. For those of you that are not familiar with what a snake is, it is simply a lot of, we call it multi-core cables, so it's a lot of audio cables in one bundle that go between, say, the stage and the audio mixer. So the most common configuration is you have a box that you plug microphones and instruments into at the stage, and then you have what's called a fan-out with all your different channels, with XLR connectors, quarter-inch connectors, that kind of thing, on the mixer end. And they tend to be pretty heavy. You can get them in different lengths, so you can get as low as a few feet to as long as 200 feet. And those 200-foot analog snakes tend to get pretty hefty, not only in dimension or diameter, but also in weight. And if you're doing a live show, it gets really, really hard to lug that around from show to show. And you can extend that further. They've got special connectors and things like that that allow you to go even further than that. But some of the advantages of digital snake is you're using one or two category X cables, so Cat 5e, Cat 6, something like that, to carry the same number of audio channels both to the stage and from the stage. So where we really saw the first utility in digital snakes is monitor mixing. And all of a sudden, instead of being limited to how many auxiliary sends you have on your audio mixer, which could be anywhere from 2 to 8, you now had access to all the channels, which was really cool. You could basically do your own mix for your own monitor, or your in-ear monitors, or your wedge on the floor or whatever. And that really helps satisfy, shall we say, the wants and the needs of the musicians. But now we're seeing digital snakes being used as the main transport equipment between the mixer and the stage inputs themselves. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start a screen share so we can just start talking about the digital, the different options that are out there. And I'm only going to cover a few of them. There are, quite a few out there, but for now, we're going to start with one of the originals, Roland, and they have several options here, as you can see. They've got a 1608, which is 16 channels being sent from the stage to the mixer and 8 channels going back. An S4000, which is modular, so you can kind of configure that to how you want. Here we've got a 32 by 8. Or an 8 by 32. The second number is always the sends, so that would be like monitor channels coming back from the mixer to the stage. So you can see here that this is a rack chassis that is unpopulated, is what we call it. So you can put, whatever configuration of ins and outs you want, which is really cool. Moving over to Whirlwind, we've got a few different options as well. And each one kind of utilizes their own proprietary audio networking protocol. So if you're familiar with lighting in DMX, it's a very similar situation. Before there was one networking standard, every manufacturer had their own proprietary system that they had developed. And this is really an issue with this area of the tech industry, or the AV industry, is that there really is no standard for audio networking. A lot of people are wanting Dante, which is another flavor of audio networking. A lot of manufacturers are really grasping onto that. And essentially what that allows you to do is, let's say you have 32 channels of audio that are coming from your stage, or 16 or 12 or whatever. You can put those channels out onto the network, and then you can pull those down, given the right equipment, anywhere in the building, as long as you have network connectivity that is compatible with the Dante networking protocol. So if you've ever had to do an audio split, now this makes it much, much easier, because all you have to do is have network connectivity and Dante compatibility, and you could be in a completely different room doing an audio mix, and you don't have to go through a whole bunch of analog audio splitters. So I'll give you an idea of what that looks like in just a minute here. So something like this, where you've got, one set of channels coming in. So this would be an 8-channel splitter, and you've got 2 outputs for each input. All right. Now you'd have to have, if you've got 32 channels that you need to split, you need, 4 of these in your rack, and that's easily a 2-rack unit, and so your rack space goes away really quickly when you're doing analog split. So being able to do that with the right equipment and one cable really, really makes it nice to be able to do that. So some of the things you want to be wary of, or at least aware of, when you're researching and shopping around for a digital snake, you need to look at something called latency, and that's going to be how much delay the signal processing and the equipment introduce into the audio signal, particularly if you have what we call IMAG, image magnification, that you're trying to match the live sound to the video, or the video is trying to be matched to, like, lip sync to the audio that the people are hearing live. That becomes an issue very quickly. And then if you're streaming or you're sending live video anywhere, either in the facility or out of the facility, you're going to have to combine the audio and the video at some point, and you want that to be in sync so that it doesn't look like a bad Chinese movie, or I'm sorry, it doesn't look like a Chinese movie with a bad dub. So you want to look at that. You want to make sure that you're not really locking yourself into one particular audio networking system, if you will. So with Roland, they call theirs RSS, or at least they used to call it RSS, and that is, again, that's proprietary to Roland, and so you're not going to get a lot of plug-and-play friendliness between, say, Roland and Whirlwind, or Roland and Behringer, or Aviom, or something like that. So some of the more common networking protocols that you're going to be looking for are Dante, something else called AVB, AES50. Those are like some of the big ones, the top 3 that I would recommend. Dante is going to be around for a while. It's getting, like I said, a lot of support, and we're actually seeing manufacturers like PreSonus, who makes digital audio mixers and audio interfaces and that kind of thing. They actually started making speakers with built-in Dante or AVB, I'm sorry, networking compatibility, and they're going to be releasing a Dante card for that. So in theory, they're making it so that from an iOS app, you can actually control and tune your speakers like a professional installer would through a wizard interface, which is ridiculously cool. So those are some of the things you want to be looking for in a digital snake solution. A lot of them, like the Behringer here, will give you the capability of plugging directly into a mixer. So you can see that you've got your inputs and outputs here. So these are inputs, these are outputs. But on the back of this is an RJ45, Cat5e cable connection. And then on the back of their X32 mixers, let me just surf over there real quickly, they have a connector as well. So let's go in there. Now, I'm no big fan of Behringer, I'll be honest, but this is a pretty darn cool product, I will admit. Let me actually get to the extra large version here. So right there, they call it Ultranet. I'm sorry, that's personal monitoring. So they have a monitoring mixing system as well that plugs directly into the board. So where is it here? Yeah, so you can plug directly into it from the snake, and you don't have to utilize any physical connections here from the stage, which is really pretty darn cool. If you ask me, oh, there it is, right there, AES 50. Okay, so Behringer's using AES 50 as their networking protocol. This Ethernet and USB is for remote control. You can plug a computer into it, and then they've got Ultranet for their monitors. So, and I can show you what that looks like real quick as well, because I mean it is really a integrated system, which it does kind of lock you in to a point, but I don't think it's necessarily locking you into the point where it's only for Behringer. I mean, as long as you have AES 50 compatibility, I think you're going to be pretty well off. So let's just take a look at their monitor mixer. All right, so these are all the channels that are coming in. So you got 16 channels, and you've got an EQ here, your output, so you can have a limiter and an overall level, your master volume. You can pan left and right, and it's got solo and mute for each channel. So this would ideally sit on a music stand next to the musician, and they can just dial in the mix however they want, which takes the load off of you as the board operator having to do that. So that's kind of a cool little ecology, if you will, of a digital mixing system. Mamba is, oh, I forget what manufacturer makes this, but this one's a little interesting because it looks to be line level based. So it's like 1/4 inch, and most digital snakes are XLR based. You can see here they've got what we call DB25 connectors. So if you're familiar with old school printers, you're going to recognize that as like very similar to an old parallel port, or maybe I hesitate to say SCSI, but and then these break out into individual XLR cables, just so you understand what that looks like. But this is being marketed as an in-ear monitor system. So again, a lot of digital snakes are being marketed for specifically the personal monitoring and in-ear monitoring crowd. So know what you're going to get. Make sure that it's really designed for front of house applications instead of monitor. Proco, which is a very popular, I'd say one of the standard analog snake manufacturers, has their digital snake called the Momentum series, and this one's modular. And so you basically you buy the system that you want in 8-channel increments. So this is an output device. You can always tell because the model name is either MI8 or MO8. So I is input, O is output. And then they've got 16-channel versions of that. You've got a mix engine. You've got an app. So they've got their own little ecology going on here as well. I don't tend to like it because I don't think it's the most feature-rich or cost-effective on the market. But again, I'm just showing you options that are out there. And all right, so that was the Clark Technique one. So now let's get into pricing. All right, so this Roland box, it's a 40-channel box. Okay, 40 input, no output. So you can see there's no output here. And retail list price is $6,600, right? So it's not cheap. When analog snakes are coming in at, for a 40-channel analog snake, let's say that's a 32 in, 8 out at 100, 150 feet, you're probably looking at around anywhere from $800 to $1,100, right? So pretty big price difference. But remember, you are paying for convenience. You're paying for a lot of features that analog just can't match. The Whirlwind, so they actually have a different one here, but this is the one that I was able to find quickly. So this is where your inputs are. These are your what we call returns. Okay, so these would be your monitor channels. I'm not even going to guess why they have this in here, but so this is what you're getting. All right, so you got 32 channels in, 8 channels coming back for aux sends, and then you, for whatever reason, you've got 32 channels going out with 8 going in. Not sure why they would do that, but again, that's $4,200. But the list price of $6,000. So you gotta realize that street price, which is what we call this, what it actually sells for, and list price are usually very, very different. The Behringer system, this is just the input-output box that goes up front. That's $900. So you can see why the X32 system that Behringer has put out there is very popular, because it's very cost-effective, and it's a decent system. I've seen it in use. I've heard the results, and it's pretty darn good. I'll be honest. I'm not gonna be Debbie Downer on it. It is a pretty good package, and you can see here that for more money, and this is a contractor version, that's on sale, and it's more money than the Behringer unit, So, but still, $1,000 and you get 8 outputs. So that doesn't seem like that good of a deal to me. But with that, I'm going to stop the screen share. Let's just open it up for questions, because that's pretty much all I had to talk about. I'm sure you guys have some questions that you want to talk about, so let's do that. Who's first?
So Tim,
Yes, sir.
just to make sure I'm understanding, you've got on stage, you've got where your instruments are all going to plug into stage boxes, and probably they're going to go, depending on the size of your stage, either a short analog snake or something like that. If you've got a really small stage, I imagine it's possible they would go directly into this digital snake. But if you've got a decent-sized stage, you're going to start out with XLRs and run it to maybe backstage somewhere, and then from backstage to front of house with Cat 5, Cat 6, something like that. Is that right? Am I understanding that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me share this real quick with you. So some of you in medium to large size churches will recognize this. This is what we call a floor pocket. This may be something that you're familiar with. I'm not saying everybody is, because not many. I'm not going to say that most churches have these, but so this would be where you as a musician would plug in your instrument, and then this would also be where your monitor output would be plugged in. And then on the back side of this, these are hardwired in, and you have analog audio cables running back to, let's just take the Behringer unit here, to one of these. Okay, and this would be where it would plug in, right? And then this would have that Cat 5, Cat 6 cable running back to the mixer. So for sake of argument, we'll call that run the long haul. So, but yeah, essentially you're right. I mean, for a church like mine, which is mobile, we would likely have this in a rolling, this particular stage box, we'd have it in a rolling rack case, and we would just plug in direct to that, because because we're mobile, we can't install anything. So we'd have to just plug directly in and unplug at the end of the service and box it up, and out it goes to the trailer. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. It's not that you're getting rid of analog altogether. It's just for the longest run, the run from the stage to the mixer, you don't have this 2-inch cable, 2-inch diameter, 3-inch, depending on, you've got a Cat5. Maybe 2 if you want to be redundant, just in case it goes south. So that's much easier to run if you've got a big enough conduit under the floor. If something goes south, no harm, no foul. You could probably run another one if you had to, another Cat5, and you'd just be in a better situation. And like you were saying, the Dante system that's network-based, if you wouldn't even necessarily have to have a straight, uninterrupted cable Cat5. That could be just running along your church's network. And for example, like our church, which is why I think that we're all digital, we've got a mixer, a digital mixer backstage that's monitor mixes. We've got a digital mixer front of house that's front of house, and then one in another room that wasn't built when the building was built, but it had network access. And I always wondered how they went about getting the audio over there. Well, they just plugged into the network. I think that we've got a system like that. So, you know, there would be no reason why you couldn't remix for different circumstances all over the building, even if it's all done over the network. You know, maybe you have video overflow in the youth room for Easter Sunday, and that's the only time you ever use it. You take the monitor mix board up there for just that Sunday and then mix specifically for that room so that it sounds great, and you send video, and yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, and another thing is that I actually neglected to show you the coolest digital snake, in my opinion, that's on the market. So let me do that real quick. It's actually the PreSonus. And what makes this cool is that this is an actual standalone mixer as well. It's designed to be run all on software. This is actually quite a large touch screen tablet that they recommend, but you can run it on an iPad, you can run it on an Android, and it's, you know, wireless. Now, for me, I'm a physical guy, so I want something I can touch. I want actual faders. I want actual knobs. I don't like this software idea because, you know, if it freezes up or I have to, you know, reboot the device, then, you know, whatever the mix is going to probably be maintained while it's rebooting, and that may not be a good thing. But what I wanted to show you is that PreSonus, because this is how they've designed this, is to run off of software for your control, they actually have combined the mixer and the stage box into one. And this is their 32-channel version. They have a 16-channel and a 32. But what I have never seen is in one package, pre-configured, this is the way it comes, 32 in and 16 output. So you can have 16 auxiliary sends, which is insane. I don't think you're ever going to use that much, especially for a monitor mix, but it's nice to know that it's there. And because it's wireless, your musicians can wirelessly connect with their iOS devices to do their own monitor mix, you know, which is nice. But what I am really excited about with this system is with this particular functionality right here. So this is the card that I was telling you about. This is the ABB card that comes installed standard. Okay, so this says control, but they just announced their firmware upgrade, which will allow you to plug this into one of their Studio Live mixers, which I'll go to. So let's do this. So one of these guys, because it has the same card, and then all of a sudden, you know, say you got the 32-channel mixer, you can go in here, and I'll just zoom in so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Because they have a selector switch on every channel right here. So you can actually say that channels 1 through 16 are digital because they're coming in over the Ethernet cable or the Cat5 cable, and then you still have, you know, your local inputs for, let's say that you have your wireless mics at the back, you know, your receivers. You can plug those in locally, and these would not be digital inputs because you're using the analog inputs in the back because you have that capability. You know, it's one of the reasons I love this board is because they give you access to every single input locally if you want it. So just one of those really cool things about PreSonus. They will be coming out with a Dante card that will fit into this slot on their mixers. Not sure why my internet is so slow tonight, but so you can see there, this is replaceable. You know, it's just 2 screws. You swap it out, and it's the same on the RM series, the rack mount ones. I'll show you that. And some people may think that I get paid by PreSonus because I push them so much. I don't. They put out a good product. So again, same configuration, 2 screws, just swap it out. So in my mind, you know, they designed it one way, but they can't. You know, you can use it as a digital snake as well, and that's the way I would prefer to use it because, again, I like physical things I can touch and feel and all that. So I think I've covered the breadth of the options that are out there. Again, make sure that you are, when you're in the market or if you're in the market for a digital snake, either for monitoring or for your main front of house sound, that you're getting something that's going to have compatibility now and in the future. So I would say AES 50, Dante, or ABB are going to be the 3 protocols that you should really be looking for in a digital snake, because I like Roland. Roland makes a great product, but I don't like the idea of being locked into whatever their proprietary technology is. And I understand why they did it. I think they should probably jump on the bandwagon before it's too late. But hey, I don't run the company, so. So Mark, what questions do you have? What information were you looking to get out of this hangout?
I just think just by joining, just to see what you guys are going to be talking about.
Okay.
Learning a little bit more about audio is not going to definitely hurt me, and so I was just getting on to come out here for the first time and join up and maybe start following along and learning.
Okay. Well, we're certainly glad to have you. What have you learned so far? I'm curious.
I guess I really didn't know that audio was able now to run over Ethernet cables at that. I guess at the speeds, I guess too, because audio needs to be. It's different than networking. And then you're only talking 8 wires in a regular twisted pair set of Ethernet cables. So they're breaking that all digitally out, which makes kind of sense. But I guess it makes, because what I'm used to, even in the old church I came from and what I'm seeing in our new church that we're at now, is that, yeah, those jacks in the floors, I mean, those are just individually ran right back to the board. I mean, and we don't have in-air monitoring system. We have them, packs we have, I guess, is what they have, that their wireless is sent from the up in the back where we're at. But I can see where just even cabling or setting up a new run, you wouldn't need to do all the individual cables. Now, I guess my question is, I can see the benefit of that, but also is there, is there a quality of sound issue? I mean, you talked about something about latency too a little bit there. I mean, is it more expensive to try to get that latency out there, and do you lose quality because now you've gone from analog to digital? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question actually, and I would say that because digital snakes are like an active system, they're plugged in, they require power. They're able to have preamps, and preamps are usually something in an analog world you only find on active equipment. Something like, a sound mixer would be the most obvious. So when you plug into it, the preamp really is what colors the sound. It either warms it up or it makes it not sound natural, that kind of thing. And so the quality of the preamp is very important. And I think it was the Behringer, actually, that uses they use Midas preamps. And Midas, if you've been around ProSound for any length of time, you'll be familiar with that name. They make really high-end sound equipment. They're really well known for their audio mixers, ironically enough. So usually Midas is going to be outside the budget of most of the churches, at least that I kind of target, and so I don't really talk about them. But they do make really good quality stuff. Let's see. Let me look up what PreSonus is actually using, because they use, I believe, something called the X-Max preamp, and I just have to, it's X-Max by, it's their own. Yeah, they made that, and I think X-Max is probably upper mid-level would be where I'd put them. So not the best, but not the worst. I mean, you got to have some sacrifices in somewhere if you're going to offer your products at a lower price point than anybody else. I would say Behringer's okay, but all right, their mixers are pretty good. Their digital stuff is pretty good. It works. I'd say they're better than, say, Blackmagic Design. Not that they make audio mixers, but as far as build quality and reliability, I'd say that they're better. But you have to be a real technophile to be able to tell the difference in my mind, because you're talking about the quality of the microphone, and you're talking about the quality of the cable between the microphone and in this case, the digital snake box. You're talking about the quality of your network cable. You're talking about the quality of the preamps on the board. You're talking about, your amplifier inputs and outputs. You're talking, and each stage is going to introduce a certain amount of harmonic distortion, let's say. And then you get into, the final step is how good are your speakers. And I would say that given all those variables, the average person is not necessarily going to be able to hear the difference between one preamp and the other, because you can't really tie it to just a preamp, unless nothing else changes. Right. So I kind of laugh when people are like, "Oh, well, it makes it sound like this," and I'm like, "All right, whatever." You think that, and I'll have my own opinion, and we may disagree, but we can still respect each other. In terms of latency, I wouldn't really worry about that. They pretty much got that dialed in. My only concern is if you're doing analog to digital, digital to analog, and you're making that jump several times in the signal chain, that would be where I'd start to get a little concerned. So, for example, if you're doing an analog to digital conversion at the stage box or wherever you're plugging your microphone cable in, and then you're usually doing another conversion if you're going back out to, say, a speaker or an amplifier or something like that. Where the Behringer system really comes into its own is the fact that because it plugs directly into the board, you don't have that digital to analog conversion.
Right.
Whereas, if I had a digital snake and an analog board, I'd have to make that conversion again. So, I mean, the milliseconds do add up. Like with video, every time I process the signal, it adds, a certain amount of delay. So there's no really getting around that. If you have, I'm just going to throw a crazy number out there, a 1,500-foot cable run, that's going to introduce a fair amount of delay as well. So I would say that for even large churches, you're not going to have cable runs like that, and if you are, you're going to be using light pipe or fiber optic anyway, because I mean that's the lowest latency transmission signal that you can get at this point. So, and there is another product that I could show you that's based out of the UK that uses light pipe. It's probably not the most cost-effective, but it is modular and really configurable, which makes it really nice. And the level of support you get is pretty awesome. So, does that answer your questions? Did I miss any?
No, I think that's good.
Okay. Now, Juan, I can't tell if you're waving at me because you have something to say or if you're talking with your wife. Oh, you're good. Okay, excellent. Let's see, what else can I say? Oh, yeah. One of the big downfalls of analog snakes is running it through conduit. Man, I cannot tell you the nightmare that is. I mean, it gets so hard and so tight making that cable pull. They actually have like lubrication gel that you spray all over your cable before you pull it through, just to ease the transition or ease that cable pull. And let me show you what I mean by how it can be difficult. Let me pull up an analog snake, and I'll give you an idea of why it can be difficult. So that's a fan out to fan out. I'm looking for a stage box. Let me try this. All right, there we go. That's a great image. All right, so let me share this real quick and light box it. All right, so this is your stage box, right? This is where you plug in. I mean, it's a simple 8-channel snake, but look how many cables you have, right? And you got to figure out a way to run this all through, let's call it a 2-inch conduit pipe, right? Well, you can't group them all together and shove them through because it's going to be way too big. I mean, each of these connectors I think is a little over ½ an inch in diameter. So when you got 2 inches to work with, that adds up pretty quickly. And then if you've got bends in the conduit, curves, hard 90-degree corners, that kind of thing, it's a nightmare. So what you have to do is you have to stack these back, fold the cable back over itself, and so you get this really big, long train, I'll call it, of connectors that are all taped together so that they fit through the pipe. And let me tell you, as an installer, this right here, running this is, I think the last time I did it, it was about a 75-foot run, and it took me a day and a half, just because I had two 90-degree corners to get through, and I had me and I had a kid helping me out, and I still had to take the conduit apart at several junctures just to make sure I could snag it through. So when you're talking to me as an installer and saying, okay, we're thinking about a digital snake, I love you. You're my friend, because we're talking about a couple of Ethernet cables which are so easy to pull that it's a no-brainer. I would tend to agree with Paul in that whatever digital snake solution you have, it's going to require either one or two cables. Some of them split out input and output just so they can make sure that it's all good to go, and they're not doing crosstalk and that kind of thing. But let's say that your digital snake solution requires 2 cables, I would pull 4. Because, I mean, why not? The cable's cheap, and it's better to have backups than to, be in the middle of a service or a program and all of a sudden your snake goes down because, you got a break in a cable somewhere, or, whatever. Things happen. Maybe a small mouse got in and started chewing your wires, It's easier just to swap over to cables that are already there because pulling new cables in the middle of a program is just not an option. I mean, let's face it. So that's another huge advantage to digital snakes over analog snakes. Now, we can get into the argument of, well, analog sounds warmer than digital, and digital just sounds too clinical, it's too cold. We get into that sound argument again. And it's just, honestly, it's so subjective, I can't even really talk to it, You're going to hear what you want to hear. I mean, let's be honest. You're going to be biased and colored by your own experience, by what you've read, what other people that you respect have said, and they hear. I mean, come on, let's be honest. For me, it's about clarity. Are you getting clear sound that is intelligible, be that music or the spoken word? Are you getting good coverage? All the basic sound principles. If the product meets that, why not? I don't see what the issue is. I can tell you that there was a significant difference in sound when we went to our PreSonus mixer from our old Mackie analog. There was just a clarity there that just was not present, and that would be a very significant improvement in the preamps. That would be a time where there was a very noticeable difference. But I mean, you're almost doing a 20-year jump in technology. So in that kind of situation, yeah, I can understand that there would be a noticeable difference. But I lost my train of thought. Sorry, train left the station. It's gone. But yeah, so what I was thinking in my head derailed me was that these are powered systems, so you do need to have power available for them. Oh my god, I can't believe. Yes, of course. So probably the most noticeable benefit for digital snakes is by using the Cat cable, Cat 5e, Cat 6, whatever it is, it naturally rejects interference because of that tight cable weave. Okay. So I don't know how many of you have been in a situation either in your own facilities or in somebody else's facility where you get a nasty, nasty 60-cycle hum. Or maybe you're hearing a sports radio station in the middle of the service. I'm not going to say that digital snake systems are immune from issues like that, especially 60-cycle hum. If you've got a ground loop issue, then it's very likely that that will continue. It may be lessened, the effect may be lessened by going to digital snake, but if the problem is electrical, going to a digital snake is not necessarily going to solve that. So just know that ahead of time. Don't get your expectations up to the point where it's unreasonable. Know what's likely to happen and what's not likely to happen ahead of time. But if you have RFI, radio frequency interference, then you could pretty much kiss those radio stations goodbye, which is really, really cool. My old church, we had hanging overhead microphones for like choir and instruments and that kind of thing. And you push them up high enough, you're going to get the local radio station that covers sports on the AM frequency. And so I never advertised the fact that people could get updated on their sports scores by coming to see me, but it was really irritating, because those are the microphones that you really got to push sometimes. Unfortunately, to the point where the noise floor is also raised and audible in order to get any sound for the video live stream and the recording. So that was an unfortunate situation that really the only way to get around that would be to run new cables. But the other issue with analog is that the jacket on audio cables, so that would be like the rubber coating, the insulation, That's all fine and good. That's great when it's there, but the second you get a hole in that insulation, all that copper now becomes an antenna, and it's pulling in the interference that, or the radio frequencies that are around it, the signals that are around it, and that's really that's one area where radio waves can enter into your system, and it's inherently just ridiculously difficult to track those down in an installed system, because a lot of times the cables are just not accessible. My old church, those cables were up above the wood lacquered ceiling. What are you going to do, pull the ceiling apart? I mean, get real. It'd almost be better to make those overhead mics wireless. In fact, that would definitely be the cheaper way to go. So that's digital snakes versus analog snakes in a very big nutshell. I think we're right. We're almost at an hour. We're about 45 minutes. Not bad. Mark, I'm kind of curious. What part of the country are you in?
I'm in Lower Michigan.
Michigan, nice. Berrien Springs area?
That would be over towards the lakes. We're in towards the middle, where like Kalamazoo is, or below Grand Rapids.
Okay.
So we're kind of in the middle, down by the Indiana border. We're about 20 minutes.
Okay. So is that what, a few hours north of you, Paul?
Yeah. I'm in Lexington, or just outside of Lexington. So, yeah, a few hours north.
Same time zone, though.
Actually,
yeah, we're Eastern?
Yeah, we're Eastern.
Fantastic. Well, LaJuan and I are on the West Coast. He's in California. I think that's a well-documented fact at this point. So, you mentioned, Mark, that you're in a church right now that you have belt packs that people are using. Are they wearing like headsets or in-ear? How does that work? I'm trying to get a better understanding of what your system looks like.
Who was that question directed to, Tim?
Oh, that was to you, Mark.
And I've only been at the church for 2 years and got sucked into the media side. So I know, and I sang on, when I first got there, I was in the worship team. It's the first time I ever used in-ear monitoring system, which I ended up pulling them all the time halfway out through through worship time, because I couldn't stand them, because I wasn't used to them. I was used to just wedges on the floor or whatever. But so I know we have packs, and then we could turn them left to get vocal, and then I think right was for instrumental. We could just raise our hand and say, I want more of the guitar in it. So they must be doing it all from the board, and I'm still we're cross-training a lot of people, so I'm going to get into that side of it. And so they would hit a button and readjust my pack. And so most of the, probably we have, I don't know, 6, 7 packs probably up there at a time, if not more. So it's just headsets too, and a lot of them were wearing double headsets, so then it would cut you out completely from hearing anything. And so, but yeah, I think that's how I know what they want to get to, because, I was there, and when I first got there, even my wife commented on that, the practice time was just a bunch of hand raising. I need to hear him, I need to hear him, I can't hear her, and it's like we were playing 20 minutes of fixing the monitors so these people could, especially the singers, I'm like, really? But I wasn't going to get into it with them, but we spent so much time on that, and it's like they really need to look at, like you said, or I haven't done enough research. I know that they make them that, like you said, each individual person can control what they're hearing in their own ears, and they really need to look about something like that. So that wouldn't take so much time of,
Right.
pre-practice.
So maybe it might be good in one of the weeks coming up, Paul, to talk about personal mixing systems. That might be a good one to cover, because there might be a need for it.
Yeah. I can tell you what we do is at least during practice, we have someone on the front row that has, since we're digital, has a laptop, could be an iPad, whatever, and then you just get eye contact and mouth the words, yeah, more guitar, less, and then the person on the front row, that's his job. Is he just watches for people to change stuff while you're doing it, and in between songs and things like that. So, and it really matters that I think it's better in a digital situation because we were joking about this earlier, but it's the case that in a digital board, the settings are saved. So it's not the case that someone comes in the middle of the week after you've had practice and thinks, oh, neat knobs, and they start twisting stuff, and it gets totally messed up. If all works well, that's saved. That's like writing a document on your computer and then leaving on Friday, then coming back on Monday. Chances are it's going to be the same unless something has gone wrong. So that's nice too, that it's not, oh, the youth had their practice in here on Thursday and we were practicing Wednesday night and now everything's screwed up on Sunday morning. It just doesn't work quite like that. It's all saved in their presets and all kinds of good stuff that digital allows that analog just didn't.
Makes sense. Makes absolute sense. But yeah, I would say, I mean, there's so many options out there for mixing systems that, I mean, based on the digital mixer, or did you say you have a digital mixer, or do you know?
Yeah, we're all digital.
Yeah, I believe so too as well, but I don't know what the brand of it is, and I know that they had looked I think they were looking at that PreSonus and wondering because you could hook up iPads to it and all that kind of stuff, but I don't think they ended up going with that one, but I know it's digital of some sort.
Okay. Yeah, they may have ended up with like a Soundcraft SI Expression or an Allen and Heath Q32 or something. But yeah, depending on the board, there may be a complementary mixing system like the Behringer, because a lot of manufacturers have them. So might be worth looking into.
Well, couldn't you, in theory, though, let's say we did something like that, if we did want to bring somebody up front to do that, we could do the Ethernet up front, right? Run it, well, however, from the main board back of some kind of controlling, right? Or, I'm not sure what they have for, like you said, external. Is there a way of hooking in some kind of external control to give this second person way of doing monitoring instead of the guy, in the back doing the main audio?
Yeah, and I think that's what Paul was kind of commenting on, is that you can have an iPad that controls just the monitors, just the auxiliary sends. So like on the PreSonus boards, you can actually set permissions for wireless devices like iPads, iPhones, iPods, that kind of thing, so that all they can adjust is auxiliary sends. They can't adjust the main board parameters and that kind of thing, so that your main mix is safe, which is good. And that's one person on an iPad. The other way to do it is everybody has their own iOS device and they're just responsible for their own mix. Depends if you like some people argue that, well, that's going to clutter up the stage, or I don't have the real estate on my music stand for an iPad, that kind of thing, or the screen's too small on my iPhone. There's lots of complaints, or potential complaints about something like that. But it's really exciting, because it used to be that if you wanted a dedicated monitor mixer, then you would split your audio signals and somebody would be off to stage right or stage left, and that would be all that they did at their own dedicated soundboard that was probably a carbon copy of the front of house board. And they'd be like, okay, I need so-and-so's vocal more on my monitor, and that's all they would do. And a lot of medium and small churches looked at that and they're like, well, we can't afford to do that. We barely have enough volunteers to run our main board. let alone the budget to get another board and train somebody up on that, and blah blah blah. So it's a really exciting time because the cost for entry for something like that is so much lower. I mean, I hooked up a church almost a year ago with a remote mixing solution on an iPad mini. Because he's also the pianist, he's also the head deacon. I mean, the guy's constantly floating around the church, and it's like, as long as he's in Wi-Fi range, he's connected to that board, and he can make changes on the fly. Because the permissions are set to the point where he has access to everything. He just has to know how to use it.
That's another great point, Tim, is a lot of churches have horrible mixing locations. So they're in basically another room with a little hole in the wall that looks out onto the main auditorium, and you're not going to get good sound that way. So with something digital, you could potentially have an iPad that it might look like you're just playing on an iPad from the middle of the auditorium sitting next to your spouse, where in fact you're remixing the sound, and you're actually doing a better job because you can hear what everyone around you hears, as opposed to being in another room where you can't so much hear. So that's another good advantage. I've seen a lot of times at our first satellite campus, we got an iPad, and the guy that was mixing sound, he would walk around during practice and remix it based on what people will hear from where they're sitting on Sunday morning or whenever we have service, and that would really improve things because, quite frankly, wherever the sound person is, they mix to make it the best that they can make it, but they might not be hearing stuff that someone comes up and said, yeah, it's really loud here, or it's real, and it could be that they're complaining, but it could also be that they're just not able to hear because whoever made the decision for where to put the audio person didn't know anything about audio. They just knew that they didn't want the audio board in the middle of the room, which is actually the best place for it from an audio standpoint. So doing this remotely, you can overcome that problem, and that's really, really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, when I train audio operators, I always encourage them to walk the room, because it's not going to sound the same necessarily from your mix position as it is to the person in, middle left. And the idea is not necessarily to make it sound perfect, because, I mean, let's be honest, that's kind of a hard target to hit, but to make it sound roughly the same, so that what to expect once, the program starts. And I'm in a really good situation simply because being a mobile church, the only time to rehearse is right before the program. So we get in, we start set up at 2:45 in the afternoon on Saturdays, and we have a 5 o'clock program. So as soon as the speakers are up and everything's plugged in, it's rehearsal time until 4:30. And I'll get where I'm happy with the mix, and then I'll go walk the room. We have something of a weird situation. We have our subwoofer back by us, and so it's been really difficult for me to judge how loud to put the subwoofer because we have it on a separate control on subgroup 4. And so because it's so close to me, it's really loud and off to my left, but when I go walk the room, I can't hear it. And so being able to kind of gauge, okay, this is how loud it is for me, and this is how loud I have to have it in order for everybody else to hear it and enjoy it and appreciate it. So eventually I'm hoping to get a second sub and we can actually do the pole mount speaker situation, subs underneath the speakers, everything's in phase, everything is good and all that, but got to save up for that one. We got to get a new video system first. But yeah, being able to walk the room and adjust your mix on the fly is awesome. Um, you know, having that capability is great, but that brings up a discussion on security, and it's really important to know how to lock down your wireless network. I would say have a dedicated Wi-Fi network just for tech, or if you have a complex enough tech system or collection of systems, you might want a dedicated network for video that is separate from audio. Just especially if you're transporting media back and forth, because the last thing you want to do is overload your network. Things like your SSID, so the name of the network that's broadcast, and you pull up your phone and it says, do you want to join this Wi-Fi network? Most routers have the ability to turn that off, and so people won't be prompted to join the network. Obviously put a password on it. That's step number one. But because you don't want just anybody with an iPad being able to download the app and being able to change the mix on you to what they want. Because there are people that would do that, let's be honest. We don't like them. But I call them tweakers, but not in the classic sense of the word. It's just because they like to tweak. The sound is never perfect. There's always something wrong with it. There's always room for improvement. So I'm gonna, tweak every little setting to make sure that the sound is the best it can be. And a live program is not the time to figure out what that knob does. Sorry. That's what rehearsal's for. That's what practice is for. If you don't know what it does, here's a thought: read the manual. Let's make sure that we know the equipment that we're using before we go and experiment with it, particularly in a live environment. So, any other questions?
One other thing that I thought, because we didn't cover this, about a digital mixing desk is, right now if you're analog and you want to add effects to a channel, you have to have probably a one rack space piece of gear, and if your worship leader, minister, music, whatever, says, man, that sounds great on my voice, Sally back here really could use a little more reverb. Well, you only have one, so you're out of luck. But if you're on a digital system and they want to put reverb on everybody, they want to put a compressor on everybody, you just name the effect, and they want to throw that on everyone or everyone but one person, or it's up to you. And so that's a really nice benefit that is not a lot of people think about, but everyone sounds just a little bit better with reverb, and if you put that on people, you can really notice an at least perceived improvement. If you've ever been to a place where they have karaoke, you might notice they have reverb out the wazoo, and that's because people that sing karaoke may not be quite the singers that they think they are. Maybe that's where the people on American Idol get the idea that they can sing and then they show up and they can't. I don't know, but that's something to keep in mind, that you can do a lot of things with the digital system for a lot less money once you've installed it, if someone changes their mind kind of last minute on how many effects you actually need versus how many you have already bought.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of people, they look at analog mixers and they say, oh, well, it's a few $100s. Why should I spend a couple grand on or more on a digital mixer? Well, you got to look at everything you're getting in a digital system. We've covered digital snakes pretty well, but you're getting effects on every channel. You're getting compression on every channel. Limiter. I have a hard time with that one. On every channel, and not just that, but at least with the PreSonus equipment or the mixers, you're getting all of that on every subgroup. You're getting it on every auxiliary send. You're getting it on every, you believe you even have it on the 4 effects processors. You know, you've got it on the main output. You know, you've got 16-band graphic EQ. You know, these are all pieces of equipment that used to be outboard in your racks. And sure, you can get a 4-channel EQ or compressor for, you know, a couple of $100. But if you want an apples-to-apples comparison, you're going to spend more money doing the same thing or having the same capability in analog that you do inherently with digital. And the other thing that you just can't do with analog ever is the preset capability, the scene recall, the channel library. So for example, and you kind of alluded to this, Paul, already, is let's say you have a youth service on Friday night and you have your main worship service on Sunday. Okay, the youth service is probably going to be a little more rockin', a little more upbeat. It's going to have probably different EQ and just configuration requirements than a standard service. Well, with digital mixers, the youth can have their own preset or collection of presets that basically remember every parameter on the board for every channel. And it's a series of button pushes, and every parameter is recalled, just like that. Whereas with an analog board, you got to take a picture of the board, each configuration, and you got to try and match it painstakingly, every channel, every potentiometer, every fader, week in and week out, and it just gets to be really, really aggravating. Trust me, I've been there. And it gets to the point where if you're sharing an analog board, let's say you have a Saturday church and a Sunday church, after each service you have to do what we call zeroing out the board. So all of your EQ, all of your knobs go to 12 o'clock, all of your faders go all the way down. I mean, it just gets to be a real chore. And digital mixers are financially, or they're economical enough nowadays that the cost of entry is pretty reasonable. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about small churches not being able to afford the equipment that we talk about, and I'm going to hit this again because I really believe it. If you, in your personal life, if you want a $350,000 house, okay, okay, maybe that's a little big. Let's say that you want the top of the line 128 gig iPad Air 2. Okay, that's probably going to run you about $600, I'm guessing, $600-700. Okay, and you got $200 in your bank account. Well, what do? Well, you really, really want it. You know, it's going to really help you out. Blah blah blah. Whatever justification you want, be it real or not. Well, $200 is not $700. So what do you got to do? Well, you got to save the money for it, right? So I don't understand why this is such a hard concept for people to understand. That if the equipment is going to, if you really need the equipment, number one, and number two, it's going to last you a long time because it's quality. I don't understand why we need to sacrifice the quality of the equipment just because of budgetary reasons. Well, you take in a certain amount of money every month, okay, and if you really need the equipment, then you really got to get drastic sometimes. You know, maybe there are some ministries that you're financially supporting that aren't really relevant anymore, or you know, maybe somewhere you got to cut. I mean that, or you got to increase your giving, one or the other. If it takes you 6 months, if it takes you 18 months to get the money, it's still going to be worth it, because otherwise, what's going to happen over a 10-year period, you're going to spend more money in the long run buying the cheap stuff than you are getting the quality stuff to begin with. That's my opinion, and it's based on real life experience. You know, I've seen it happen. So, yeah, okay, small churches, 20, 30 members. I get it. I've been there. You know, I have clients that are that size church. But at the end of the day, at some point in the church's life, they're going to get to the point where they need quality equipment, and doing it cheap is not going to do it anymore. So what's the plan then? That's what I ask. So, you know, I'm not going to mess around with this between now and then, I'm going to get to the eventuality that you're going to need quality equipment. Unless high quality tech is not that important to you and you're okay with mediocre tech, then by all means, buy the cheap stuff. It's no skin off my nose. I don't make any money when people buy equipment, so I'm just calling it like I see it, and if you want quality tech, you need to make the investment in quality equipment. That doesn't mean you have to go buy a $90,000 audio system. No. It means you got to do your research so that you know you're not wasting money. And wasting money is what good stewardship's all about. I mean, we hammer that almost every week, right, Paul? Yep. Because it's such an important concept.
Yep, and we say it so often that it's not spending less than you have to. That's not good stewardship, and it's not getting the best that you may someday use, and for the next 10 years no one knows how to use it, so it just dry rots unused. Neither of those is good stewardship. Good stewardship is getting what you need for the best price you can to accomplish what God has called you to. If God has called you to a television ministry, then you should not, under any circumstance, be using a video camera from 20 years ago and other stuff that you found that the local television station was throwing out and you rescued it from the dumpster. That's just not a good choice. And on the other end of the spectrum, sometimes a church will go into a new building and they'll include everything they may possibly use in the next decade, but they have no one to run it, they don't know how to use it, etc. And so they, in the name of being prepared for what they could need, they actually waste money on that end. So it really matters that you get the appropriate equipment for the duration that you think it's going to live for, and not, you don't skimp on it. You don't say, well, I'm going to spend $100 on this system that should cost $1,000, and then you're surprised in a week when it dies. Or on the other end of the spectrum, a $100,000 system and there's only 100 people in your church and no one knows how to use it. That's the opposite end of the spectrum. So you've got to kind of balance those things.
Yeah, absolutely. How would I put this? How would I summarize that? I think a lot of people get tripped up in planning too far down the road without a clear vision. I don't mind 10 to 15 year planning. I think that's awesome. But the vision has to be there to the point where you're going to stick on that road. I think from a technology perspective, 5 years is probably about where I would. That's usually what I ask. You know, where do you see yourself as a ministry and as a church in 5 years? Because the technology is changing so quickly that it makes my job as a consultant very difficult to get that solid foundation that churches can build on in the future. Because I have no idea where the technology is headed in the future. I mean, I want to say that everything's going wireless, but I don't know. You can get good wireless video right now at 30 feet, but if I'm going to send something 75 feet, 150 feet through walls, I don't really think there's a good solid solution for that. I mean, if you watch sporting events, you got cameras down on the field, and they lose signal if they get line of sight off. You know, so, and I mean, those are $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 systems. Well, I don't know many churches that can afford that. So, yeah, I'd say plan for about 5 years in the future, and make sure you have a vision that's clear enough and easily understandable enough that people can get behind it. Because, yeah, I completely agree. If you're planning 10 years down the road for what could be, but there's no vision to support what could be, and there's no plan to get to what could be, you're just wasting money. Let's be honest. So, any other thoughts before we wrap up? No? All right. Well, thank you guys for being a part of this, and we will see you next week.